Welcome back. This is another real estate deal breakdown. Today is part 3, I believe, on a property in Beacon that was an absolute disaster to close. And I am not going to dox anybody on this, but boy, there were some people who didn't do good business on this transaction. And there's a lot of lessons that I've learned. And I don't know how long this video or podcast is going to be, but it may get a little lengthy. So if you're not familiar with me, before I get started, I've been a full-time real estate investor now for 10 years. And at this point, I've done over 500 properties that have closed successfully. So I got a lot of experience. All this information I share is either a lesson I've learned or a deal like this that I'm breaking down, or it's, an interview I do with somebody. So this is real world practical information from the trenches. So if you get value from this and you're watching on YouTube, if you could subscribe and like the video, would mean a lot. And let's get into this deal because, oh my gosh, I owned this house for like 7 months and it should have been like 3 months. So this was a home I bought direct from the seller from, I think it was like an online lead or something like that from years ago. And the guy last summer agreed to sell us the house for $350,000. We offered the guy basically $100K below what the market value was as is. I knew at that time $350,000 for a house in Beacon, can't go wrong. So we went under contract, closed on it, got hard money. And what happened in this case is we went to go list the property after we cleaned it out. And we had like 10 offers on this property. And it was crazy. It was highest and best. People came in. These first buyers we were supposed to sell to, they offered $25,000 over ask, which was like, holy shit, like this is insane. So obviously we took that. And the issue with that was that they did not need a mortgage contingency to go into contract, but they needed a mortgage to buy it. So they signed a contract that had no mortgage contingency in it at all. But the only way they were able to buy this was with them getting a mortgage. So when you do that and you're not having a contingency to get a mortgage, you're risking your down payment, because if you don't have contingencies in your contract and you're buying it as is, which is exactly what happened here, if you don't perform, you lose your down payment. That's really what you have as the seller. If they screw you over, you lose your down payment. So they put down $10,000, which was not enough down payment in my opinion, but because their offer was so high, I was like, you know what? That's probably worth taking the risk on, because I knew that if they didn't close, I'd get 10 grand. So we go into contract. They're getting hard money. So this was an entity buying the property. This was not an individual. This was an entity buying the property to flip for a profit or rent for a profit. So I was not selling the house to like Sally Joe, the homeowner. This was an entity, an LLC selling to an LLC. So I figured that they'd have no issue getting the hard money, because if they're an entity that flips homes, they probably get hard money a lot. Turns out that's not the case. So we go down the path, no title issues. Obviously, it was just as is. There's no issues with the building department, nothing. So sign all the closing documents, everything's good. We're on track to close. And then all of a sudden, their lender out of the blue was like requesting stuff that made no sense. So we kind of pushed back on them. We're like, why do you need this? Like, you already did there's no contingency here. You shouldn't need this in order to buy it. So something didn't add up. So we were pushing on them pretty good, saying like, what is going on here? Like, we're ready to close, everything is clear. And then we got an email from their attorney saying that, their client can't buy the property anymore. And, they want their down payment back. And I'm like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, they were ready to close and they needed like a few other things that we pushed back on. Now you're saying that they can't even buy it? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So they're asking for their down payment back. And I'm like, to my attorney, I'm like, I'm not giving them their down payment back. They tied me up for, over a month now. And we don't even have this thing closed and they want their down payment back. I said, the only reason I sold them the property is because they had no contingencies. If I knew that they had a mortgage contingency, I wouldn't have signed with them. I would have signed with the other person who had no mortgage contingency that was at $465. That's the only reason I took their offer, besides the price, was their terms were the same as the other offer, but it was 10 grand more. So I was like pissed off. I'm like, no, this is crazy. So I wasn't happy about it. And now at this point, this is what people don't realize when you sit on homes for a while, when you're flipping. Every day you own the property, you have to pay daily interest on that, right? And obviously you get paid, you get charged monthly if it's hard money. If it's private money, you pay it on the back end usually, but you're still paying a per diem of interest, right? So every day you have a house, at least in where I invest, it's, could be 100, 200, sometimes $300 a day, right? It's not cheap. So they flaked out. And now they wanted their down payment back, which I did not give back, because I'm like, no, like, we'll handle this thing separately because this is a non-issue. We don't need to give it back to you right away. So anyway, the down payment sat in escrow. We had to properly default them, which means we had to send them all the notices saying like, please close, please close. If you don't close, you're in default. They didn't, perform. They didn't close. We did a time of the essence. We tried to close. They wouldn't close, blah, blah, blah. So then once, you do the second or third one, you can then take the property back and list it again. So in this case, we ended up getting another buyer off market to buy the property for $450, right? Which was $25,000 less than $475. Now, I will give this buyer credit. They were a good buyer. They ended up closing. Surprise, surprise. And I didn't have to pay a buyer's agent commission on this because they were a licensed agent themselves. So I did not have to pay the buyer's commission, which effectively brought the offer up to $460, right? So, $10,000, because the commission would have been like $10,000 right around there. So, I looked at the offer like, yeah, it's $450, which is a lot lower than $475, but I don't have to pay the buyer's agent. So I'm really getting like $460 net. Which is still $15,000 less than $475. And the big issue I had with this was that it took that buyer, the new buyer, like 5.5 to 6 weeks to close. So that I had to make hard money payments during that time. And then while we were like defaulting the first buyer, that took like a month. So I had like an extra 3 hard money payments I had to make, which was around $7,500, which just got eaten right up in holding costs. So at the end of the day, I still made money on the property. I'm not going to lie. I still made a profit on this. It was a good deal. I think I made like $46,000. So what are some lessons you can learn from this where if you get into a situation where you have multiple offers, you don't get, tricked by some smokescreen on the front end to then have them not close on the back end? So number one, what I should have done is I should have asked the buyer to put down a bigger earnest money. In New York, usually it's 10% of the purchase price. So if they were for real, they would have put down 10%. And usually people are like, well, Greg, hard money's going to give them most of the funds anyway. Well, I have a better objection to that comment. Most hard money lenders, most of them, not all of them, are going to give you 90% of the purchase. So in that case, the purchaser would have to put down 10%. Well, if the down payment is 10% and the hard money's making you put down 10%, when they go to the closing, because I've done this dozens of times, you just come to closing with your closing costs and whatever the attorney fees are, because your down payment's already there. So that's a non-issue. I should have done that. So that's lesson number one. If your buyer is buying the property and they are not needing financing, AKA there's no contingency for financing, have them put down at minimum 5%. At minimum 5%. If not, 10%. Because if they put down a down payment, like if this buyer put down $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, they'd be freaking out when that thing's in escrow and they're like, oh my God, we might lose all that, because that's what they're on the hook for. Okay, lesson number 2 here is you need to call the lender no matter what financing they're getting to vet them out, because we didn't do that either. We didn't call the lender the thing is, we shouldn't have really needed to call the lender because they didn't have financing, but their contract had no contingencies, but they were still getting hard money, right? So that, in my head, the way I interpreted that was, okay, they're going to have a hard money lender fund this deal, but they don't need a contingent upon that happening. So what I should have done, or if the agent, one of us, we should have called the lender and said, hey, is this person qualified to borrow? Is this LTV going to work? Is this a loan you're going to be able to realistically do? And most likely, if we did that, we would have found out that the answer was no. And then we didn't have to sign the contract. But we didn't do that, and we assumed that they were already pre-qualified to get hard money, and they obviously weren't. So, the hard money lender couldn't write the loan up for whatever reason. I don't know what it was, but it is what it is. So anytime you're selling a property to somebody and they're getting financing, whether it's contingent upon it or not, you or your realtor needs to call the lender, and you need to get the skinny on, can that person actually get the loan? Because if they can't get the loan and it's going to be a gamble, you don't want to waste your time going into contract with somebody who's not going to be able to close. It's the most frustrating thing ever, especially in New York where it's so fucking expensive. So call the lender and make sure that that person has a realistic chance of actually getting the financing. And if they don't, sell to somebody else who has better qualifications. Like, this business is all about selling the property to the best buyer. And the best buyer sometimes is the person who pays the most, but other times it could be the person who actually is going to be able to close at whatever price you agree upon. So we should have done that. And then the third lesson here is you need to enforce your contract, right? You cannot let people just get out of jail free, metaphorically speaking, because when somebody breaches a contract, there's damages to the other party, right? And in this case, that's real revenue to my company that should have been realized but wasn't because of this buyer not doing the right thing. So stick to your contract, stick to your word. Don't make the mistakes that I made. Make sure that you get a big down payment if it's a non-contingent offer. Make sure you call the lender to vet them. And if I were to do that, I would have realized this was a BS buyer and enforce your contracts when you can. That's why you sign contracts, to enforce them if you need to. And I hope you got value from this. And if you're in the Hudson Valley and you have a property like this you want to sell to me directly, I would love to buy it. So if you have any properties and they're in the Hudson Valley, the Seattle area, or the state of Delaware, you want to wholesale a property to me, send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com. My Instagram is @grego_37, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.